Okay, so tonight we're talking about toxic positivity and why it's okay to not always give a fuck. Round of applause for that statement right there. You can throw the emoji in the chat box. It is a great feeling. We welcome it. Hands up. It's okay not to always care about everything all the time. We want to normalize that. We want to welcome that tonight. So, I am your host. I'm Danielle. I am the therapist marketing lead here at Shift Collab. And if you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. If you are a returning community member of ours, thanks so much for coming back. And I'm going to go through a few housekeeping items so that we all feel prepped and ready to learn in the space here. So again, we encourage you to show up as you are. We know it's the evening time, so that might mean you're on your couch like me. You might be in bed, cozy. You might be in the office still, whatever that means. We're here for it. So if you feel comfortable tuning in, come up how we want to connect with this and directly connect with you and not a square. But we understand if you don't. Whatever your choice is tonight. Next, who the heck is Shift Collab? And who the heck are our hosts? So Shift Collab is a mental health practice, and we help Canadians build the lives they want, one session at a time. We're proudly female founded and have built a clinical team of over 125 therapists, Emily and Zoya, who are our lead hosts tonight, being two of them. I will pass the mic to them in just a bit to share more about themselves, but I'm first going to introduce, you might see Lucy Ford in the chat here. She's going to be our tech host for tonight. So again, any questions that you might have, throw them in the chat box. She's behind the scenes supporting everybody from that end. And she's also our social media and community manager here. And then, yeah, I already introduced myself, so that's me. So thanks, Lucy. Okay, so housekeeping items, let's break down this platform if you're new to it. So Sessions is the video platform that we're in now, if you didn't hear me say that before. And I'll just guide you around a little bit so that you feel set up for success and that you know where you're clicking and where we're going to be navigating tonight. So we have some great functionalities to the bottom left and the bottom right of your screen. So on the bottom left, you'll see a show agenda button. If you want to follow along with where we are in the event, you can just click on that show agenda button and our breakdown will show up for you. So you can just follow along of what we're speaking on. And then in the bottom right is where we're going to be mostly hanging out tonight. So you'll see a chat box, a polls box, a Q&A box, a notes box, a takeaway box, and transcript box. We want to converse with you throughout the entire event. So anything that you feel is quotable or you resonate with or you're shouting out loud or a spotlight, you want to celebrate or you want to just speak to, throw it in the chat. If you have questions, also throw them in the chat. Lucy will be monitoring those, so we will get to all or most of your questions by the end of the event. We do have an hour here, but we might not take the whole hour. We just want to make sure that we allotted enough time to speak with you as we want to get to your burning questions at the end, so that you can pick Zoya and Emily's brain and get the answers that you came to get. There's also a transcript box as well. So if you prefer to have this event broken down for you in a different language, head to there. You can download it after. You can also take your notes during the session as well. We will be sending out an email tomorrow to everyone here and those who couldn't make it as well, giving you the recording, giving you the slide deck, giving you the breakdown of everything you need. But if you want personal notes, that box is there for you as well. Okay, so before I pass the mic, does anyone have any questions about the functionalities? If so, put them in the chat box. Lucy will be your go-to. We're ready to go? Okay, Zoya and Emily, please take it away. We're going to start off with Emily Crocker. Oh, we're just going to introduce them first. Do we have Emily?
She's on mute.
Oh, Emily, you're on mute. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Hi, my name is Emily. I'm a registered social worker with Shift Collab, and I'm just learning how to use the mute button.
Yay.
So I am going to be starting us off tonight. talking a little bit about gratitude and what gratitude is. And then I'll pass the baton over to Zoya to talk about how that relates to toxic positivity.
So yeah, go ahead and intro yourself.
Hey everyone, really excited to be here and thank you everybody for joining. My name is Zoya. I'm one of the registered social workers here, one of the therapists at Shift Collab. Like I said, very excited to dive right into the topic, and yeah, I'll pass it off to Emily to start us off with gratitude.
Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Okay, so before we do get started with Emily, we do have a poll before we dive in. So our first one here, have you ever felt pressured to maintain a positive state despite facing personal challenges? So you're going to see a polls box pop up in a second where you can vote. A means not really, B, sometimes, C, often, and D, almost always. So you should see a box pop up on your screen right now. Go ahead and cast your vote in. And feel free, again, safe space, be honest. We're going to leave this up for a few seconds here and just get a collective consensus on how we feel about positivity or gratitude, as Emily's going to be talking about from time to time. No worries if you selected the wrong answer. You can always put your answer that you meant to put in the chat box. D, beautiful. So almost always. All right, let's pull up these results here if we have them. Hey, Wayne. All right, so consensus is most of the time, or sorry, sometimes, often, and then almost always. So great consensus here that we often feel pressure to be positive, especially during the times where it might feel challenging to do so. Okay, Emily, kick us off. Gratitude.
Awesome. Okay, so you want to start with the basics of like, what is gratitude? And so gratitude is defined as a tendency to appreciate the good and positive. And I think it's important to really highlight the use of the word tendency, because it really signifies that gratitude is like an ongoing practice. It can become a life orientation for many people, rather than it just being a one-time thing. And so it's not just focusing on just the good and positive, but it's not about just like denying the negative and bad either. It's a tendency to see that things can be good and positive, while also acknowledging that bad things exist as well. We often show gratitude in our day-to-day lives already, right? So we might say thank you for getting a birthday gift. We might feel really grateful for an important relationship in our life. We might be grateful that we're inside on a gross day like today, rather than being outdoors. So why should we bother practicing gratitude? So research shows that gratitude is positively related to so many things that we would consider to be part of like a better life. So that can include improved mood, self-esteem, relationships. It can look like an increase in positive emotions, more optimism, more autonomy, personal growth, and meaning in life and self-acceptance. And so with all of these amazing, incredible things about gratitude, why don't we do it all the time? And so the reason behind that is that evolutionarily, our brains have been wired to really focus on the threats and focus on danger, in order to kind of keep ourselves safe and ensure our survival. But we're not in that same state anymore. We're not in those dangers that we were back in the day, and our brains haven't quite caught up. And so now we tend to still focus on the things that are going wrong or the ways that we've messed up, so that we can try and improve them or fix them. But in reality, what that happens is that ends up making us feel really bad about ourselves, because we can be really critical, and it can cause a lot of anxiety and overall just reduce our quality of life. So by practicing gratitude and finding something to be grateful in any given situation, we can rewire our brains to focus on the positive, which can lead to more positive emotions, higher self-esteem, and self-acceptance. And that can lead to more joy in our lives. So I wanted to throw out a bit of an example of like what this might look like in our everyday lives. And so those who live in Toronto or who have been to Toronto might have taken the TTC and have had the experience of being on the TTC and hearing that there's been a delay, right? So if you're on the subway, it might be that you're on the tracks and you're waiting for the subway to come and you see that the little number on the TV changes from 2 minutes to 10 minutes. Or you hear an announcement saying that it's been delayed and then it's not coming. And so in that moment, you can start to focus on all of the things, all the consequences that might come from this, right? You're going to be late. You don't want to be stuck down here anymore. It's not going to be really good. Oh, sorry. I was just reading Danielle's comment. I thought my camera was turned off and people couldn't see me. So practicing gratitude in that moment might look like being really appreciative and grateful for the podcast that you're listening to, or being really grateful that now there's Wi-Fi and there's signal down in the TTC, and so you can continue to scroll TikTok while you wait, rather than focusing on how much longer it's going to take for you to get home. So from that, let's think about how you can actually practice gratitude. It does all of this great stuff for us to practice gratitude on a regular basis. And so how can we actually do it? We do this through what we call the 4 A's of gratitude. First one being awareness. So in order to be grateful, you must first start with practicing mindfulness. So that means being aware of the present moment inside and around you. And so that can look like noticing the good and the positive around us. Like we said, today it's been snowing and then it's been sunny and what have you. And so just being aware that the sun is shining on a cold day is practicing that awareness. And that's the first step of gratitude. From there, we have appreciation. So after you become aware of the good and positive, you can then show appreciation for it by giving thanks and acknowledging it. For example, that might mean that you give thanks to your partner for unloading the dishwasher, even if they haven't completely put everything away in the right spot. After noticing, being aware, and then showing appreciation, there's also acceptance. So it's accepting things as they are, which means accepting that there's good and bad. It doesn't mean that you have to agree, and it doesn't mean that you're enjoying it or that you like it. But it's just really like a recognition that this is the situation that you're in. Things are the way that they are. And so that might mean if it's raining outside or something like that, then it's being grateful that you have an umbrella in your bag. You're accepting that this is happening. You're accepting that it's raining. You're accepting that it's snowing. I had to go pump my gas earlier today in that blizzard. And I was just like, this is just what I have to do. My car needs gas and there's not much I can do about it. And I can't change the weather. But I was really, really grateful that I chose to wear my big parka instead of my thinner ball jacket. The last one is action. So gratitude is amplified through action. So by showing gratitude for the good and positive in our lives, you can then use that as a call to action to do good things for other people as well. So that can look like being grateful to have enough food to feed yourself, and then deciding to start volunteering at a drop-in program for people who are facing insecurities. And so these are the 4 A's of gratitude. And I love seeing in the chat that people are starting to notice which ones they might already be doing, which ones that they might need some work on. Danielle, I hear you with your husband not liking the way that you load the dishwasher. My fiance does not like the way that I do laundry. But I definitely know that I appreciate it when he shows gratitude for the fact that I have done it, even if I didn't separate everything the way that he wanted to. That those are some of the things in our lives that that gratitude goes a long way when we're able to do it. So by practicing these 4 A's of gratitude, you can make gratitude a regular practice in your life, and you can improve your mental health and your quality of life. You can evidently improve your relationships as well by practicing gratitude with your loved ones. And it can improve all aspects of your life. However, practicing gratitude alone is not always enough, right? It's not enough to just only look at the good and positive. Like it says here, acceptance is a big part of it as well. It's about it also acknowledging that there is bad. Gratitude is a tendency towards the good and positive, but it's not only looking at the good and positive. And so that's, if you're only doing that, if you're only looking at the good and you're only focusing on the positive, then we can start to slip into toxic positivity. So I'll pass things over to Zoya to talk to us a little bit about what toxic positivity looks like.
All right, so before that, we're gonna head into our second poll here. So do you feel you can differentiate between well-intentioned positivity and toxic positivity? Without hearing what Zoya has to say just yet, what are we all feeling so far? So another pop-up is going to come up on your screen to take your vote. So A is yes, you do know the difference. No, you do not know the difference. And C, you're not sure. Honestly, I'm going to go with C and say I'm not sure. Who else? Also, while you're voting, if you didn't see in the chat, I want to apologize. For some reason, there was a setting that blocked you all from coming off camera, even though I asked you. So I apologize. I just reverted that setting. So again, if you do feel comfortable, you should be able to come off camera now. And if someone can just give me a thumbs up because we are in spotlight mode, that it is working, that would be fab. I'm really sorry about that. Now we know to check the settings before we dive in. Awesome. I see some thumbs up. Thanks, friends. All right, let's see these results. Can we differentiate? So most of us say we're not sure, and that's common. Second place, a lot of us said yes to, which is great. And then B, a few of us just said no. Fabulous. Thanks for voting, friends. Okay, so let's learn more from Zoya. Zoya, take it away. Tell us all about toxic positivity and why it's okay not to fucking care all the time.
Okay, thanks, Danielle, and thank you for Emily for starting us off on gratitude. And we'll be touching a little bit about what she spoke about. So what is toxic positivity? Toxic positivity is the overemphasis on maintaining a positive outlook in response to a negative mental event or experience. So this overemphasis can often come from the societal pressures or the social pressures to maintain a positive attitude, right? So we'll talk more about how the overemphasis can sometimes be at the expense of acknowledging very valid emotions. And so examples, and I think there's more examples on the next slide, are just be positive, good vibes only. I used to work in a workplace that had a sign that said no complaining zone, right? So we see these in our personal lives, in our friendships, in our workplaces, in our romantic relationships, perhaps. And so what are the implications of toxic positivity? So there's 3 areas we'll talk about. The first one will be emotional repression. So what are the impacts of suppressing emotions, right? We as human beings have the right to experience the full spectrum of emotions, whether they're negative or positive. And so emotional repression or suppressing our emotions can increase stress. It can impact our stress response. It can impact our relationships with others and ourselves. And over time, it can even cause psychological distress if you continue to kind of ignore it, right? So invalidating emotions can include the inability to understand or empathize with others or yourself. And so a lot of the times I find that invalidating those things can often come from a place of feeling discomfort with those raw emotions, right? Because it's not comfortable to feel negative, which is a very normal response. And so that takes me to the second point, which is about avoidance versus acceptance. And so avoidance is something I talk about a lot in my sessions. It's something that comes up very commonly. It's a very normal and common response to those difficult, uncomfortable, or negative feelings or thoughts, right? However, what I always say is avoidance always reinforces those negative feelings, right? Because if they're not being addressed, they'll still remain there under the surface and perhaps come out in at various times in a really big or negative way. And so acceptance obviously is the opposite of that, right? It helps us deal with the negative mental experiences and really break down the barrier of that discomfort that comes along with feeling negativity. And so over time, we've learned that building the psychological flexibility can actually improve our psychological well-being. And so that takes me to my last point on authenticity and just being authentic to yourself, right? And embracing vulnerability, although it's admittedly very difficult, it's something that helps us foster connection with ourselves and others. I don't know if we have any Brene Brown fans in the audience, probably a lot of the social workers. She's kind of like I feel like the lead social worker, something that we all look up to. A lot of our clients probably know about her as well, but she talks a lot about the connection between the relationship between vulnerability and connection and how that really brings us together as a society, right? And ideally, I think that we would tap into that a little bit more to close that gap of, just invalidating negative emotions. And so authenticity allows us to feel that full spectrum of emotions because we just can't always authentically show up as positive, right? It's just not realistic. And that's just the truth. Oh, sorry. I don't know if we had any questions, but okay, we'll go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about what do we do with this information and how do we deal with toxic positivity. And so the first point is just being realistic, right? It's okay to not be okay, and understanding that it's not always possible or realistic to be positive all the time, and feeling negative is okay. It's the normal part of the human experience, right? And so I think a good way that I talk about clients on rationalizing this during a negative experience, and I think Emily touched on this a little bit, is again, we as human beings have the tendency to focus on the negative, the perceived threats, right? I always talk about the negativity bias, and we reinforce our negativity bias the more we experience negativity, right? And it's harder and harder to be positive. And so I always say, it's not that easy to just go from negative to positive, right? So how can I take maybe a more neutral or balanced approach from being negative and just seeing the more balanced approach, right? What's a more realistic and neutral perspective to the situation? And so sometimes that can be helpful. And when you feel like you're in a place where you're feeling very negative, how can I offset that, right? Sometimes it's just not possible to just be positive and have good vibes only, right? So maybe even reframing. And I want to reference a really excellent reel one of my colleagues, Jessica, made that was on our Shift Collab Instagram page. And she talks a little bit about that reframing and how to reframe a thought. And you'll see on the screen a few more examples of toxic positivity that sometimes we hear in our day-to-day. So yeah, moving on to Danielle with our last poll.
Wonderful. Thank you, Zoya. Again, if anyone has any questions about anything that Emily or Zoya has said so far, even if you might not think it's related, please throw it in the Q&A box so that we can get to them shortly for you and with you. But before then, last poll. So where does or has, now knowing what toxic positivity is and how we can differentiate it from gratitude a little bit more, where has toxic positivity shown up for you in your life recently? So A, work, B, home, C, social settings, D, my relationship, or E, all of the above. So again, this will pop up on your screen shortly. Beautiful. Also, you can drag the box around your screen. So if it is blocking any of the information or visuals that you need, just click and drag to where you need it to be. So go ahead and submit your vote. Where has or does toxic positivity show up for you? We'll give everyone a few seconds to get their votes in. Petra, this is being recorded, so we will get it emailed to you tomorrow. Sorry that you had some challenges getting in. We're glad that you're here, no less. All right, let's see those results. Oh, yes. And if you're wondering what reel Zoya was referring to, Lucy just put it up in the chat box there for you to have a look at. All right, so a lot of us are saying all of the above. I voted the same. And then second place was work, which is fairly common as well. We actually almost took this topic to a workplace to be more specific. So that's no surprise there. And then a few of us were saying social settings, which is really common that Zoya was touching on. So thanks for voting and getting honest with us, friends. All right, so let's go ahead and move on there. Okay, so now that we've heard from Emily on what gratitude means and how that can lead to positive in a way that becomes toxic, so our toxic positivity chat, we then learn from Zoya what that looks like and how that can formulate in everyday life. That's why it's okay to not give a fuck about everything all the time. Not everything is that serious. Not everything deserves our attention or our energy. Something I like to say is protecting my peace. And hopefully you're a little bit more equipped today on how to do that, what that looks like and why, and how toxic positivity and being overly positive, especially in those areas that we feel challenged and we don't really want to be positive. It's not a positive experience for us, that we now know it's okay not to give it our full undivided attention, or the emotion that we feel doesn't match it. So just like Zoya said, it's okay to embrace the full range of emotions, even the ones that we label as negative, right? So the anger, the annoyed, the pissed off, the sad, the whatever it might be, those are okay. So we hope you learned a little bit more about that here and feel a little bit more confident taking that into the real world or any space that you feel it's going to be acceptable for you to practice. All right, so we allotted some time for Q&A and discussion. Again, if you have any burning questions, put them in the Q&A box, or we will also give you the opportunity to come off camera now that it's abled and to come off mute. So anything you want to ask Zoya or Emily or just them in general, please go ahead. We are here to give you all the support you need.
Wayne, did you have your hand raised? Or was that by accident?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's probably by accident.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, all good.
Beautiful. Also, if we can all come off mute for a second, even if you don't want to come off camera, I just want to give our host, Emily and Zoya, a big round of applause for presenting tonight and being with us. It was fabulous. Thank you. Big round of applause for the duo. Fabulous.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat box.
Yep. I have a question from Melissa, actually.
Oh, fabulous.
I will throw it out to Zoya or Emily. I'm just going to pop it up on the screen now, so everybody should be able to see this. It says, are you able to share an example of toxic positivity?
Yeah, I can answer that one. Even just building on the example I gave in the workplace, and I would say that I have probably personal experience with this. Being in a workplace that says no complaining zone. I don't know who it was put up by, like perhaps management or perhaps another colleague. But I think that kind of gave everybody a sense that they couldn't really speak. And even if it wasn't complaining, right? Even if it was constructive criticism, and kind of creating a positive environment in the workplace, and work's not always positive, right? Conflicts at work happened, especially that was in an interprofessional team. So we had a lot of conflicts, right? So I think some people actually felt like they didn't really have a place to say anything. And again, just be positive and remain positive. And really, like, I think in the grander scheme of things, it was actually invalidating people from speaking up and feeling like they could speak up. So does that address your question, Melissa, or should I give another example? Because I think we actually have a question here. Yeah,
that gives me, some insight. I mean, to me, there's this spectrum of, okay, there's the toxic positivity, but then there's like the, kind of like too aggressive in the, the negative or the complaining. There seems like I was looking for an example of one side or the other or something in the middle. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, or sort of. I guess you're trying to look for an example of toxic positivity and also the opposite. Is that correct?
Well, or just, let's say you don't want to be positive. You want to be, authentic and sort of true to what you're feeling. But what's a way to do it that is not so extreme from the other side? That's sort of more what I'm after.
Yeah, I think you're touching on one of the last points I talked about, was maintaining that neutral or balanced perspective. So another example might be with a friend. If you're talking to a friend and you're sharing some problems with them and they say, oh, just be positive about it, right? And maybe you're talking about like a divorce for your parents, for example. It's really hard to be positive, right? Perhaps a more neutral approach would be, this must be really difficult for you, but perhaps it'll build resilience for your family over time and change the dynamics in a more healthy way for you guys, right? And maybe that's just a balanced perspective where you're acknowledging the fact that it's difficult, and also validating and finding something that's kind of a sweet spot in terms of not being super negative and saying, oh, that sucks, and not invalidating and saying, oh, just be positive, like it'll be fine. And in reality, it doesn't feel like it's fine, right?
Right.
I'm not sure if that better answers your question.
Well, no, it
Melissa.
does. It does help. And in fact, it reminds me of a situation where I was talking to my boss about something, and she did the flip to the positive, and that didn't sit well with me. So I had to basically say to her, I just need you to hear me. Like, I'm not asking for a solution or I just need you to hear where I'm coming from or what I'm feeling about this or how I experienced what she had said to me. So that's kind of staying in the neutral then, right? As opposed to blowing up at her, her behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. That's being neutral. And I think that's also being authentic to what you're experiencing, right? And of course, that can be very challenging with a manager, for example, or with a supervisor, or even a friend, is challenging them on, I guess, from their perspective, they have the intention to help you, right? But I think that's part of the authenticity piece, is like, that didn't sit well with me, and this is actually how I'm feeling. And this is actually what I need from you, right? That's not what I need. So I'm glad you were able to convey that.
Okay, you did help sort of address the sort of spectrum of approaches.
Sure. Okay, great. Thanks for the question, Melissa.
Thanks.
Okay, up next we have a question from Mylene. I'm just going to pop it up on the screen again now. Are you able to give an example of reframing? So Emily,
do you want to take this one, or do you want me to take it?
I'm good either way, Emily. You let me know what you prefer.
Okay. Well, I can take this one. I mean, reframing is a really helpful tool for how we kind of like see ourselves and others, and like how we speak to others as well. So if something is going on for someone, or you're having a conversation, or you're even talking about a situation, like you're thinking about your own situation, oftentimes, like, and I know that I do it myself too. Like, I'll come to the end of the day and I'll be like, oh my gosh, like I just had the worst day ever, or like that was so horrible. And then I sometimes will take a step back and be like, well, you know what? Actually, it was hard, but I made it through it. And so in that kind of a reframe, I'm reframing it from being like an awful experience, which is a bit of an exaggeration for whatever the situation is, to something that was hard, which is true of that experience, and also acknowledging, my resilience through it, my ability to make it through. I might be able to say, like, you know what, that was really, really difficult, but I learned something through it. And so reframing it is sometimes just like taking whatever it is that's going on, again, like something that you're thinking of or going through, or someone else, turning it on its head a little bit. And so it's helpful. Reframing can definitely slip into being like overly positive in a situation where it's not necessary, or that's not appropriate. And so that could be really invalidating. And so I always find it helpful in reframing to still acknowledge like the truth in the matter, and then add in maybe a bit of a different perspective that either you had ignored or the other person maybe might not have thought of. Please let me know if you want any other examples of reframing and how it can be used.
Thanks, Emily. That was great. Just going to move things along here so that we get to all of these questions, as we've got some really great ones that have popped in. We have a question here from Mark. Let me just pop this on. Do you have any tips to help us deal with an environment with toxic positivity, like a work environment where it feels expected from everybody?
Should I take this one, Emily, or do you want to go ahead?
I mean, I know that you talked about your own experience in a toxic work environment, so you might have some personal experiences, but if not, I'm happy to step in.
Yeah, and then I'm seeing someone else also ask a question about a workplace, so this might address that one as well. And again, I think this touches also on what Melissa talked about, is being open and being a little bit comfortable with being vulnerable. Personally, for me, I love feedback. I love constructive criticism. And so I didn't take that sign very literally. I was always one to speak up. Maybe it's a social worker in me, advocating for myself, advocating for my team, and just shifting the narrative a little bit, right? And also being like, do you guys all feel this way? Like, and just being realistic, because we're all human beings. And I think that a lot of us do feel pressure to kind of mask in the work environment and just kind of like business as usual. And so I think it's really, and although this can be challenging, is pushing the envelope a little bit on what's considered to be normal. And maybe it's considered to be normal to be super positive. And it doesn't mean that you're being negative. I think it's more about just being realistic. And sometimes it's finding something to relate with your other team members if you're in a team environment. And a lot of the times you'll find that people agree with you. Right. So, I mean, personally, that's what worked for me. I was always giving feedback. I was connecting with my colleagues and saying, hey, like, what do you think of this? What do we do about this? Right. And I don't only complain. I like to also offer solutions. Right. So if that's what's helpful, especially in a workplace, do that. And I acknowledge that it takes some level of maybe confidence or comfortability with just being that vulnerable, or being the only one that's raising a problem or pushing the envelope, like I said, right? So a bit of a balance there, but I think it's just wanting to change the narrative, right? And maybe being the only one that's doing that.
Perfect. Thank you, Zoya. We have one from Shamala. That's a great question here. Any suggestions on how to deal with friends and family who love to engage in toxic positivity? And I'm sure we can all picture someone in our heads, maybe a friend or a family member. So this is a great one. A little bit of advice.
I can answer this one if you'd like, Zoya.
Sure, yeah, Emily, go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Managing some of those relationships with friends and family can be really hard. Sometimes in the moment, it might not feel like the best time to talk about it or what have you, but it can be helpful once you've had a moment to kind of like think it over, calm yourself down as well, so that you have a kind of like respectful response. But sharing your feelings with another person and letting them know how what they've said or what they've done has kind of landed for you can be really helpful in managing a relationship, right? And so kind of letting someone know, like, hey, when you said that, it actually, was kind of hurtful to me. I felt like I couldn't be myself. I felt like I couldn't be authentic. And it kind of felt like you're like making light of something that's really serious for me. And so, in the future, I would really hope if you could just let me feel how I'm feeling, or just tell me that, like, it's hard, or that you're here for me, or what have you. I would really appreciate that. And so kind of like letting them know what that was like for you, or just kind of letting them know that, like, I actually don't see it that way, right? Like, like, I don't know that this is just something that I'm just going to get over one day, right? It might continue to just be really hard for me. And I'm okay with that, right? And so also just kind of letting them know that, yeah, we might have a bit difference of opinion on this. And for some people, being positive, like just being positive across the board is how they live their life. And that is what feels best for them. And that's perfectly fine for the people that choose to live it that way. And it's perfectly fine for you if you don't. And so if you don't, then sharing with someone else that like you feel differently, or that you have a different perspective on it, can go a long way, because you don't always just kind of have to like nod along and agree with someone else. There's a way of responding respectfully that honors both you and is fair to the other person as well.
And I just wanted to add to that is even noting that there isn't always ill intention, right? People don't always have the intention to be toxic, right? Like maybe they find that from their perspective, being positive is the right thing to do, is the right thing to say to you when you're feeling negative or feeling down. So again, adding to what Emily said, and even what Melissa and I were talking about earlier, is just communicating your needs. When I say something like this is what I need from you. It's not helpful when you're XYZ. This is what I need, right? So again, communicating your needs, I think, is helpful.
For sure. And I think that answers some of the other questions that are here in the chat box that I can see. There's one from you, Denise. I think that answers your question. And there are a couple of others too. How about we move it on to this one from Satadru. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Is just be yourself considered as toxic positivity?
I think that's a good question. I would say just be yourself can be kind of invalidating, especially if you're talking about like how something is going to be hard for you. Like, today I could have been like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared to come and do this presentation and talk in front of everyone. And if someone was like, oh, just be yourself, like, okay, I am going to be myself, but I'm still scared. I'm still, I still feel uncomfortable. And so that can feel a little invalidating. And so that absolutely can, I would say that can definitely fall into the realm of toxic positivity. And so it can be helpful to kind of like, and I think Zoya was talking about this as well, like you can tell someone that it's okay to be themselves while also honoring whatever it is that they're expressing to you. So it's okay to feel really scared. And I think you're going to do great if you just show up as yourself and you just do what you know to do. Right. And so in both of those things, you're acknowledging what's been shared with you and their feelings. And you're also kind of like lifting them up and letting them know that they're great, just as they are. And that is, I think, how you might shift it from being toxic positivity into something a little bit more supportive and authentic.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question here from Sarah. And I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for submitting so many questions. This is really great. What are your tips to lean into vulnerability when individuals have been raised/taught to believe vulnerability is a liability?
It's a great question, Sarah. So again, something I touch on sometimes in session on how to lean into vulnerability, especially when not doing that is kind of normalized. Sometimes that's something that happens within families, a lot of the times within cultures and communities. So one of the things I sometimes talk about in session is the hierarchy, the vulnerability hierarchy. And like I said, vulnerability is kind of the key, I guess, to connection to other people, but also with yourself. And so when I was talking earlier about toxic positivity, I was talking all about not only does being authentic help you connect with yourself, but also with others, right? And I think that's where it starts, is how can I start to be vulnerable with myself? Again, I touched a little bit about avoidance and our tendency to just kind of avoid when we're feeling very negative or we're thinking negative things, right? Maybe it's just a distraction. Maybe we, avoid doing that pile of work and just like watch Love is Blind and trash reality TV, right? It's because it's something that we don't want to deal with. So I think sometimes when it's negative emotions, we tend to suppress them because we don't want to deal with them. And that's kind of that blockage to being vulnerable. And so I think, to answer the question, I think vulnerability starts within yourself. And then when we talk about it as a hierarchy, when I talk about it in session, is how can you be vulnerable with yourself? And then building that with someone that you're very close to, right? Maybe it's a close friend, maybe it's your partner, and then maybe growing that into your workplace, maybe growing that with your friend group, or I guess your friend group first, and then your workplace, and then your larger community, things like that. So I think it always starts within you, right? If you can't be vulnerable with yourself, you can't be vulnerable with others. And so yeah, I hope that addresses the question. Emily, if you'd like to add something, go ahead.
I think that was great.
Perfect. Okay, I think we will do one or maybe two more questions, and then we'll wrap things up for today. So why don't we answer Petra's question? I think this is great, actually. Just brings in a completely different perspective. But she has a little one. How do we teach these skills to little people, or should we at that age?
I agree, Lucy. I think this is such a good question. And I think it's absolutely important to teach these things to young kids, because what kids learn when they're young is how they show up when they're adults, right? So if you're taught when you're young that like, oh, it's going to be fine, everything's okay. If you're taught to just kind of like push things aside, to not honor your feelings, to not see the good and the bad, you're going to carry that on with you throughout the rest of your life, right? Until you start to see things differently. And so I think it's important, one, how you show up is how your kid is going to see you and see the world as well. They're going to learn from you. And so if you practice gratitude, if you talk about the sun that's shining on a, gross day, if you talk about being grateful that, and I mean, you could probably do this with your small child all the time, because I would imagine that they do things, they probably don't do it perfectly, but you're like, oh, thanks so much for helping me out. I really appreciate you doing that for me, or putting your toys away or what have you, even if it's not done perfectly. And so by modeling that, they will see it, and then they'll also start to do it as well. And then I think it's in the way that you talk to them, and you talk to them about the things that they are going through. So if they're sad or disappointed about something, rather than, just focusing on the positive, like, oh, it's okay. They'll be, oh, my favorite toy broke. Oh, it's okay. We'll get you another one. Or it's fine. You have tons of other ones. Allowing them to experience those feelings, right? Oh, I'm so sorry. That must be so disappointing. That must be really sad for you. I'm sorry that happened. Or did you want to play with any of your other toys? Is there anything else here that, we can spend this time doing? And I think in doing that will help them to see and to learn as well that it's okay for them to experience a whole range of emotions. It's okay for them to feel whatever they want to feel. And that in doing that as well, there's also a place to see the good and positive, and that those can go hand in hand. And so, yes, I would say absolutely teach it to your little ones, model it through everyone. People learn from you even when they're not kids. So the more that you do these things, the more that it will shine to the people in your lives.
That was really great. Thank you, Emily. Just leading on from that, actually, whilst we're on the topic of children, we had a question here from Karen, who asked, how do you get your children to accept your health decisions? And I just wondered if maybe you would feel comfortable answering that question.
Yeah. I think there was actually a couple of questions that you had put in there, Karen, and I think that they were all kind of going together. And so you'd mentioned making a big medical decision based off of what I imagine was, your own personal feelings, and major life decision, and acknowledging that not everyone in your life was going to accept it. And not everyone in your life was going to maybe approve of the decision that you've made. And for you, this is a medical decision. And for other people, it might be other decisions in their lives, right? Some people might decide to follow a different religion than their family, or no religion at all. They might decide to do a different job or live a different way. They might decide to, live authentically in their sexuality or what have you. And many people will have the experience of the important people in their lives not accepting that and not understanding it and not agreeing with it. And it is something that you might actually hear from a lot of people. You might get a lot of toxic positivity. It's fine. Like you got to do what you got to do. Like you got to, make the choices for you, and doesn't matter about anyone else. But the reality is that we are communal people. Humans are communal. We live in community. We are raised in community. And so it hurts when the people that we care about and that we love aren't there for us in the way that we would like them to be. And the reality is, Karen, is that we cannot force anyone else to see things the way that we do, to believe the things that we do, or to accept our decisions. What we can do and what can sometimes be helpful is honoring their feelings, honoring that it's hard for them. They might not understand, they might not get it, while also still being fair to yourself and acknowledging that that doesn't have to change your decision. Right? And so both of those things can be true at the same time. It might be really, really hard for them, and it might be really difficult, and that might impact your relationships, and it could still be the best thing for you to do. And oftentimes by validating other people, we can help to really de-escalate and to kind of like smooth over conflict or things that have kind of come up in our interpersonal relationships. And so I would say, I don't know that you can get other people, and I don't know that you can get your children to accept your health decisions. But I think it'll go a long way if you have an open, honest conversation and allow them to voice how they feel about it, voice, the impact that this is going to have on them. No one wants to lose a parent. No one, these things are really hard. And so by giving people the space to say that, it can go a long way in smoothing things over. And it might not turn it all around, but it can help. And so I would recommend shifting from trying to get them to accept and really just trying to see if you can at least see the other person's perspective, yours and theirs.
Thank you, Emily. Why don't we just close out with some top tips from Zoya? We've had a few questions. I'll pop one of them up on the screen, but just some quick top tips for people who have been dealing with toxic positivity. So there's one here which I will pop up from Jimmy, and I know there were a few others from friends, family members. This one is a loved one. So I've been dealing with a loved one who often confuses toxic positivity as being supportive, and I am told I'm not being supportive enough when I provide constructive criticism. Any tips? So this is for all of you out there who might have asked a similar question to this one. Zoya, please take it away.
Yeah, of course. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier in terms of asking people what they need, right? And sharing what you need. So I think earlier we were talking about sharing what you need from the other person. This is not helpful. This is what I need. But I guess if it's the reverse, what may be helpful is say, again, clarifying your intention, that your intention was to support them and perhaps you weren't doing that in the best way. But tell me what exactly you need from me in order to feel supported, right? I don't know the nature of the relationship, but I'm assuming it's someone that you do want to be able to support effectively. But ask them what would be helpful, right? And maybe they need you to be a little bit more positive, right? Maybe they don't need you to be toxic, but maybe the positivity is something that they need. And that's fair enough, right? We don't want to put everyone in a box and say that being positive doesn't work for everyone, because a little bit of positivity goes a long way. I think it's problematic when it's toxic and invalidating, right? And perhaps that person in that moment, they just need a beacon of light, right? I think someone actually just asked a question about toxic negativity, which is probably someone that has a negative general outlook on life, right? They kind of fixate on the things that go wrong or the things that are negative in life. And that can really bring you down, right? So maybe they need a little bit of positivity. But I think asking is always helpful, right? Is opening that line of communication. Like I said, what's helpful? That wasn't my intention and I apologize, but what do you need from me? Because maybe I'm missing the mark and I'd like to support you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think we'll wrap it up there. A lot of the other questions in here were very similar to the ones that have been answered before. And if we didn't get round to answering your question, I'm just going to pop Emily's and Zoya's profile links so you can go and check them out on the website and potentially book a meet and greet with them and, ask some future questions with them there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lucy, for hosting our Q&A, and for Emily and Zoya for your insightful answers. We really appreciate you. And for those that are still with us, asking your questions and sticking around, we appreciate you more than anything. If you're new to our community, welcome. If you've been here before, we love you. So all of you will be getting a follow-up email as well. So if you want these links again, they will be in that email, as well as some additional resources that Emily and Zoya have handpicked for you to further support you in all of these topics. So again, round of applause for Emily and Zoya, our hosts tonight. Thank you so much for joining in, everyone, and we hope to see you for our event in April, which again will be announced on our website and in the email that we will send you tomorrow, as well as a follow-up. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their evening and a really great day. Reminder that Emily and Zoya are open to free 15-minute meet and greets should you want to connect with them.
Thanks everyone for your time and for joining tonight.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.